We're coming to you live from our Auckland Park studios. This is Prime News on SABC 3. Here are the stories making headlines.
It's a kind of a different meeting. Normally we have meetings, we talk about trade, and we'll be talking about trade and other things. But that certainly will be the subject that comes up, yeah.
In a highly anticipated meeting, President Cyril Ramaphosa this evening is holding talks with the US President Donald Trump.
Professional education sector baseline over the 2025 MTF is 104 trillion. And 9.5 billion will be added over the medium term to keep the teachers in the classroom.
Finance Minister has proposed additional spending of over 180 billion rand over the medium term in areas like education, health and infrastructure.
It's not enough, we would have wanted more, but it's not as bad as we feared.
And the new measures announced in the budget to protect frontline services have been welcomed by public sector unions. Good evening and welcome to Prime News on 3. A pleasure it is to be in your company this evening. I am Paulette Nell. Let's start first with this story leading the bulletin tonight. US President Donald Trump says they will be discussing some wide-ranging issues with President Cyril Ramaphosa and his contingent. Trump says he has been getting too many complaints about Africa. President Cyril Ramaphosa says he hopes Trump will listen with an open heart in their bilateral talks.
We've had tremendous complaints about Africa, about other countries too, from people. They say there's a lot of bad things going on in Africa, and that's what we're going to be discussing today.
Nothing this parliament can do, with or without you, people are going to occupy land. We require no permission from you, from the president, from no one. We don't care. We can do whatever you want to do.
These are articles over the last few days. Death of people. Death. Horrible death. Death. I don't know. To pick anyone, white South Africans are fleeing because of the violence and racist laws.
Let me clarify that, because what you saw, the speeches that were being made, one, that is not government policy. We have a multi-party democracy in South Africa that allows people to express themselves, political parties to adhere to various policies, and in many cases, or in some cases, those policies do not go along with government policy.
The national budget paints a bleak picture of a tough economic environment characterized by global headwinds arising from the trade wars, persistent logistic constraints, heightened political uncertainty, and high borrowing costs. The local economy is expected to grow at 1.4% this year, lower than the March forecast of 1.9%, with the National Treasury assessing risks to the outlook to be elevated.
An eventful start to the year, Godongwana presented a third iteration of the budget amidst a highly uncertain and unpredictable external environment. National Treasury says compared to the budget presented in March, this budget reduces anticipated revenue and spending. Tax revenue projection over the medium term has been revised down by 61.9 billion rand, mainly due to the reversal of the VAT rate increase and the updated economic forecast. To boost revenue collection, there will be an increase to the fuel levy and no inflation adjustment to tax brackets. Government says it's considering major reforms to state spending and budget process, hinting that reviews have identified billions of rands in potential savings from poorly performing programs that can be redirected in future budgets. Government says it has a borrowing requirement of just over 588 billion rands in this financial year. Government debt is higher by 1.2% than earlier projections at 77.4% of GDP in this financial year, the highest since democracy. Debt service costs will take 22 cents of every 1 rand collected in revenue, or 1.2 billion rands every day.
Debt is peaking in this financial year, but is beginning to a downward trend. And the higher number than the 12th of March at the moment is occasioned, mark that point, by the change in the GDP number, because debt is sensitive to that number.
Government plans to spend just over R1 trillion on infrastructure over the medium term. It says the majority of the funds will be used to expand power generation capacity, upgrade and expand the transport network, and improve sanitation and water services. National Treasury says it's also making it easier for the private sector to invest in infrastructure and setting the right incentives to boost investment in infrastructure. Gloria Musi, SABC News, Pretoria.
Meanwhile, the provincial education sector will get 9.5 billion rand added over the medium term to keep teachers in classrooms and hire more staff. The provincial health sector budget is 845 billion rand over the medium term and will be increased by 20.8 billion rand over 3 years to employ 700 new doctors.
Public sector workers have long raised concerns about the deteriorating government services that are robbing the country's citizens of essential services. Finance Minister Godongwana took a moment in his latest budget to share the extract of a young medical student, Sarah Stein from UCT, who describes the pressures faced by those in the healthcare sector.
Part of this letter reads, and I quote, "Working in a public hospital with a way too few resources punches you in the gut every day. It is not just the trauma of seeing your patients die, it is having no gloves in a delivery room, no alcohol swabs to clean wounds, and knowing that nurses stop at the shop on the way to work to buy their own gloves and masks."
This is a daily experience for millions in the public sector who are often forced to improvise due to limited resources. Minister Godongwana announced some adjustments to add more financial resources to public services.
The provisional education sector baseline over the 2025 MTF is 104 trillion, and 9.5 billion will be added over the medium term to keep the teachers in the classroom and hire more staff. The provincial health budget is 845 billion over the medium term. This budget will be increased by 20.8 billion over the 3 years.
4,000 police officers, about 6,500 teachers, 800 doctors. It's not enough. We would have wanted more, but it's not as bad as we feared.
We don't want to see the budget, at the end of the day, affecting the full implementation of the resolution that we have signed.
Katlego Logodi, SABC News in Johannesburg.
Experts are warning of looming inflationary pressures as the Finance Minister Godongwana ditches a VAT increase for an increase in fuel levies.
Minister Godongwana says he had run out of options to increase revenue in the absence of a VAT increase. This, he says, necessitated the increase of the fuel levy, which had not been increased since 2022.
3 consecutive years, I've not touched the fuel tax. 3 consecutive years. I'm doing it precisely because I've run out of, there are few options.
Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group says the increase will have a negative impact on consumers and industries alike, who will have to pay more for taxes for every litre of fuel purchased. Program Coordinator Mervyn Abrams likens the proposed fuel levy increase to a VAT hike in terms of impact.
We are likely to see costs around food, but also around other manufactured goods and services in the economy.
Old Mutual personal finance expert John Manyika agrees that producers of goods and services may be forced to pass on the costs to already pressured consumers.
The concern with fuel levy increase is that there might be inflationary effects with that, because it's not just going to affect the commuter. You have to be mindful of the fact that producers may be tempted to pass on the cost to the consumer because there is cost of transportation and so on. So one has to consider that.
Diabo Seto, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Welcome back. Let's continue with this. Experts say that the key test for an African credit rating agency will be how effectively it carries out its mandate. Key stakeholders, including economists and policymakers, have gathered for the Africa Annual Credit Rating Conference in Cape Town.
International investors only invest in countries that have been assessed by the three global rating agencies, Moody's, S&P and Fitch, none of which is from a developing country. Experts broadly agree that Africa often faces higher borrowing costs when accessing global capital markets.
We at S&P Global Ratings, we provide global benchmark based on credit fundamental. And these credit fundamentals points to our rating definition of what is a credit rating.
Meanwhile, some African corporations have welcomed the discussions, saying they should ensure that they consider the nuances of the continent.
If I may speak for Kenya, for example, it's really the convergence between the sovereign risk rating and the corporate rating, because we have very good companies in Kenya that are performing well. So in terms of the fundamental performance of a company, not in doubt, a good investment, company to be in and all that.
The Africa Credit Rating Agency, which is set to be operationalized this year, is being established to address concerns of perceived bias and how countries on the continent are assessed. Nosipho Khatebe, SABC News, Cape Town.
Deputy President Paul Mashatile says government plans to spend 940 billion rand on infrastructure investments over the next 3 years. Mashatile says South Africa wants to collaborate with France by investing in infrastructure like ports, rail and power to promote local value-added trade through Africa.
Government plans to spend over the next 3 years 940 billion rands in infrastructure investments. It's close to 1 trillion rand. South Africa, strategically placed at the tip of the African continent, is an important investment destination, both for the market prospects inside its boundaries, but also as a gateway to the rest of the continent, which has a population of around 1 billion people. We wish to collaborate with France by investing in infrastructure like ports, power, water, rail, and manufacturing to promote local value-added trade through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
Thank you for staying with us. Now on to this. The South African Weather Service says the cold front that the Western Cape experienced has mainly subsided, but the cold and cloudy conditions can be expected for the rest of today. The service says that there is still a possibility of rain over large parts of the province.
Cold, wet weather conditions are a usual occurrence in Cape Town during this time of the year. But most people, like these under the bridge in Greenpoint, find themselves without warm food, warm clothes and blankets, and out in the cold.
If you were inside, you make one mistake, and then you outside. You see, I went to my kid's birthday. I slept there last night, the Sunday night. I eat there, I sleep there, and when I come back, I was out.
The South African Weather Services says the cold and cloudy conditions are expected to persist for the day.
In terms of temperatures, we see that from tomorrow on, that's now Thursday, our temperatures is still going to be on the chilly side for the morning hours. However, by the afternoon, we'll start to warm up already.
Some residents believe they are experiencing cold, harsh conditions due to poor and inadequate service delivery in areas where they stay.
I think it's very poor in our communities because as where I'm coming from in Bonteheuwel, the roads is flooded. I'm talking about the drains that people, that the municipality is talking about, they're going to fix and whatever, but they're not living up to what they say.
The weather is expected to clear up tomorrow and towards the weekend. Lamli Maneli, SABC News, Cape Town.
Well, with that, time now to see what the weather has in store for us. Stay tuned.
Good evening and welcome. Let's take a look at what to expect weather-wise for tonight as well as tomorrow. Clear skies through the central and northwestern parts of the country. Otherwise, it will be partly cloudy in places with isolated showers and rain over the southwestern parts of the country and along the coastal regions of KwaZulu-Natal into the adjacent interior. Tomorrow, expecting some early morning fog patches over the eastern parts of the Free State and the western parts of the Western Cape. Those fog patches expected to reduce visibility to less than a kilometer in places, so please do take caution if you are driving early tomorrow morning and do keep a safe following distance. Otherwise, expecting isolated showers and rain along the coastal regions of the Eastern Cape as well as KwaZulu-Natal. Now, the South African Weather Service has issued a yellow level 2 warning for damaging winds and waves. That's along the western, southern as well as the eastern coastal regions for tonight. Tomorrow, subsiding over the western parts, so that warning only valid along the southern as well as the eastern coastal regions, possibly leading to difficulty in navigation at sea. Overnight temperatures seen Johannesburg down to 5 degrees, Calvinia at 1, Graafrenet an overnight low of 6. Tomorrow peaking at 18. It will be fairly cold to cool in places. Richards Bay 22, 23 in Mosina and in Lephalale, Phalaborwa a maximum of 26. And then on Saturday, expecting a fine day, cool to warm conditions, slightly light winds over the interior, strong over the interior of the Northern Cape. That's your weather. Good night.
That concludes our time together this evening. Much gratitude for joining us from myself and the team. Until next time, it's good night and God bless.